Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is Nassau County Legislator Josh Lafazan. Legislator, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me on, as always.
I do want to talk about a press conference you held earlier this week, and this was in light of a recent incident. The Nassau County Republican Committee paid for ads that distorted an image of you in such a way that you described them as anti-Semitic. Can you describe what these ads looked like?
You know, at 29 years old, I've ran for office since I'm 18 when I won my first election to the school board as a teenager. In that decade plus since, I faced anti-Semitism in my life, but I never faced anti-Semitism in a campaign until this one. The Republican Committee of Nassau and my opponents sent out an advertisement that is the Stereotypical Antisemitic Trope. It's a picture of me with my nose enlarged, with my teeth elongated and yellowed, with fistfuls of cash, and with smoke in the plume in the shape of horns above my head. It's indefensible, and I held a press conference comparing this photo to a photo used during Nazi era. These were the type of photos that my grandfather, who's a refugee of the Holocaust, were subjected to dehumanize Jews, to make Jews less human. And it's completely indefensible for my religion or for anybody's religion to be brought into politics. I am outraged, as is the Jewish community.
Let's talk about that a little more. How have your constituents reacted? Because this is coming at a critical time. The country and the world has seen such a rise in anti-Semitism ever since Hamas's brutal attack on Israel on October 7th. Can you describe what your constituents are saying?
Absolutely. My office phone has been ringing off the hook, and it's Republicans and Democrats, right? These are people of good conscience who are outraged that in the wake of the Hamas terrorist attack on October 7th, where we've seen unprecedented levels of anti-Semitism, not seen in this century. We see a lynch mob in Russia storm an airport searching for Jewish passengers on a connecting flight. We see Cornell, my alma mater, death threats being made at the Jewish Life Center. We see synagogues in Europe being painted with swastikas, and Jews across the world have to have armed guards at their synagogues just to worship. And at this critical juncture of Jewish hatred and danger for the Jewish community, to continue to run this ad is not only callous, but it's so dangerous to the safety of the Jewish community. And I feel an obligation to speak up and say enough is enough.
You had a really unlikely defender come in your support on Twitter, and that is Congressman George Santos. You were running against him for his seat, and he responded to your tweet, and he wrote this: "Look, I am not one to defend Democrats, but the truth is that the Nassau GOP 100% knows he's Jewish. The whole island knows. These images are abhorrent propaganda like images used by the Nazis." What do you make of George Santos's response? Because you've been a vocal critic of him.
Sure. There's a meme that I like, and the meme is, it says, "The worst person you know just made a good point." And it's a funny meme because I thought about this when George Santos tweeted that. It does not change for 1 second my opinion that George Santos is the most reprehensible elected official in modern political history and needs to be removed. But I think it's indicative of folks across the aisle seeing right through the garbage and seeing that this is indefensible. Right, my opponent's hiding from the press, but the Republican committee decides to come out and say, "Oh, we're trying to make a representation about taxes and spending." Well, if you're doing that, then why is my nose enlarged and my teeth elongated and yellowed and the horns? It's completely indefensible, and quite frankly, it's an outrageous excuse that holds no merit. Because again, I was the youngest Jewish elected official at 18. Right, I've been in public office for a decade. It's a very well-known fact that my grandfather was a Holocaust refugee and my cousins are in the IDF. And so to hide behind a callous excuse is wrong. I am glad that I've had scores of other defenders who are not under federal indictment, like Mr. Santos. It was just a surprise to see on Twitter that I hope to quickly forget about.
I do want to talk about George Santos in just a little bit, but I want to talk about how Nassau County GOP responded. Newsday released a statement from Nassau GOP spokesman Mike Deary. He pushed back on the claim that the ad was anti-Semitic, and he said this, quote, "The Republican Party has no knowledge of the religion that either of the candidates in question observe. Nor do we associate illustrations of greedy and corrupt politicians holding money with any ethnic group, race, or religion. What's your response that their defense is essentially, we didn't know he was Jewish?
Yeah, I sincerely hope that Mr. Deary doesn't believe that the voters are that stupid, right? That is an absolutely asinine statement to make. It's asinine because I was not the only Jewish candidate this happened to this year, let alone in past campaigns. Again, it's an outrageous embarrassment that instead of doing the right thing, showing contrition and taking accountability, they're doubling down, which we believe is political malpractice because folks in the community are so outraged that they want accountability here. And again, I don't think there is one person stupid enough to take him at his word.
We touched on earlier anti-Semitic incidents on the rise across the country at elite universities, especially, including 2 places you graduated from, Cornell as well as Harvard. So how would you describe the moment that we're in right now?
Yeah, it's a really dangerous time. And I'll tell you, to having been on campus in Ithaca and in Cambridge, I felt the anti-Semitic undertones of the student body, and we saw demonstrations that we felt were anti-Israel. And this was years ago, right? This was 2016 and 2017. And so this is not new. I think what this moment is showing is something that Richie Torres and other members of Congress are calling the illiberal left, right? It's these radicalized college students who, quite frankly, in the wake of the most deadly terrorist attack proportionally in history in the 21st century, are coming out with celebratory types of protests for Hamas, right? I mean, this is a clear moral test that these kids are completely failing. I blame social media and the rise of misinformation, especially on TikTok, to radicalize these young kids who are getting their news there. But I also blame college faculty who are spreading anti-Israel propaganda and nonsense. And quite frankly, as we're seeing, indoctrinating a generation of folks to hate Israel and to be misinformed about Israel, right? The idea that anybody would call Israel an apartheid state when knowing that Arabs and Jews alike have the right to vote and sit on the Supreme Court and serve in the Knesset, et cetera, right? Calling, Israel the aggressor here when they simply were responding to a terrorist attack. The radicalization of the student body is dangerous. And what I think is most dangerous is these are our elite universities, right? These are kids who are going to become the next generation of captains of industry and elected officials and so on. And so I think we have to think about accountability for these students, that if you're going to champion Hamas and you're going to champion terrorism, that perhaps Bill Ackman and these folks are within their right not to hire you at their companies.
You and I talked directly after the October 7th attacks, and you were calling people out by name in Congress, saying that their behavior was anti-Semitic. So I'm curious, a lot of this language, this anti-Semitic language, is coming from people who consider themselves progressive. So what do you think other Democrats need to do in this moment?
Sure, and again, I think the illiberal far left is a great way to describe it. And I think Democrats of good conscience and moderate Democrats like myself need to continue to call out emphatically that these folks are on the fringe and don't represent the majority of the party. Right, I represent, as a Democrat, a very significant Jewish population here on the North Shore of Long Island, and these are folks who I believe are in line with my brand of politics, which is that, of course, we support Israel, and that we are unwavering in our support of our most important ally, and that we condemn anti-Semitism and we condemn Hamas's terrorist attack. And so the numbers in Congress, as you saw on the resolution condemning Hamas, I think it was 94% of the Congress came out in support, which shows that the overwhelming majority of Republicans and Democrats are on the same page here. But as Democrats, we have to call out those on the fringe and say that they do not speak for us.
I do now want to pivot to embattled Congressman George Santos. The House is expected to vote on expelling him today. The measure to do so was introduced by a Republican New Yorker, Congressman Anthony D'Esposito. So what do you make of that, and what do you make of this vote?
Sure, it's about, almost a year too late, right? The New York Times story came out, I think, December 19th, 2022. The fact that this vote is being held in November is an embarrassment. The fact that I don't believe this vote will pass is outrageous. The fact that we have known that George Santos is a criminal, and in fact, the indictment pretty much corroborates what we already knew, which is that he was a fraud and a thief and a liar. And the fact that this won't pass with unanimous votes, and the fact that this may not even pass at all, I think is the sad state of affairs for the United States Congress, in that there are members of the Congress who put their own party and political expediency above the welfare of the republic. Right, this was exactly what our forefathers and the founders of this country couldn't protect against. Right, they could protect against the tyranny of the majority, and they could protect against the assault on free speech and freedom of religion with the Bill of Rights, but they couldn't protect against our own members putting themselves before the country. It's an unfathomable concept, and so I am not optimistic that this will pass. I hope I am surprised, but I am not optimistic given the treatment that he's gotten of almost a pass from a significant plurality of the Republican caucus in Congress.
As we all know, he's been charged with 23 fraud-related felonies, but he has not been convicted yet, and he has pleaded not guilty. So if he does get expelled, this would be historic because he hasn't been officially convicted of a crime. Do you think that matters?
Yeah, I think he's an exceptional case, right? It's not one allegation. If it's one allegation, right, everyone has the right, including Mr. Santos, to be innocent until proven guilty. But if it's one allegation, it's one thing. The dozens of allegations are so damning and so concerning, given the fact that this is a member of Congress who votes on bills and has access to classified documentation, and whether it's the phantom donors, because we know somebody owns him, or whether it's who gave him the money to run in the first place, or whether it's stealing from other candidates or a veteran service dogs charity, the absolute malice and the nefarious intent of these actions, they disqualify him from serving in Congress, because it's one thing to violate the law, it's also another thing to violate the public trust. And that's what he's done here.
Legislator, you have a busy week, an election coming up in less than a week. So what's on your radar here? What's next for you?
Sure. We're a team that believes that turnout is key, and we have to get every voter out to vote. And we know that this November is an off-cycle election, and it doesn't matter. Every single vote counts. So we'll be knocking doors. We'll be making the phone calls. We'll, whether we have senior citizens on the phone or we have interns in high school on the phone, we are a multi-generational coalition of folks who believe that local government is where the action is, who believe that local government is where things get done, and who want to see me win another term. So we'll be working hard through Election Day.
Legislator Lafazan, good luck. Thank you, as always, for coming on.
Thanks for having me.